SideFX has released the Houdini 20.5 Keynote, and I wanted to take a look at some of the things that they have allowed us to take a look at. So I just want to point out and stress the fact that there is an absolute ton of information that came in this keynote. It's over 2 hours long, and I would highly recommend you go and watch, honestly, the whole thing, because there is a lot of information in there, a lot of new things, and it's way too much to cover in one video, and they really go over into detail a lot of different things. But there are some things that I wanted to talk about, and I made some notes on some things that I thought were kind of big features and some stuff that I really wanted to take a look at. So first and foremost, one of the first things that they talk about, and I think this is honestly the big highlight that we all have kind of started to understand is taking place, but they've actually come out and said it themselves. They want to be a full CG pipeline inside of Houdini, where you can do literally everything inside of Houdini. We saw Blender has moved into this type of a mindset as well, but now SideFX has told us that this is what they're working towards as well. And I think that's absolutely huge for the industry. It's kind of a blow to Blender, if you ask me, because while Blender, there's a lot of good things about Blender, SideFX in Houdini is already implemented into a lot of studios' workflows. So it's going to be a lot easier for it to be brought into the entire workflow and be adopted, whereas Blender, they kind of have to relearn stuff, and I think that Houdini will fill that role a lot better. Now, are they going to fill everything, and then is everything going to shift over to Houdini as a full suite? Probably not, and probably not for a very long time if it does, just because everyone's kind of already got their pipelines that they've built up, and it's a lot more difficult than just, hey, let's switch to Houdini for everything. So while that does bring a lot of good things to Houdini, it's going to take some time for that. It's not quite there yet, but eventually kind of that's their vision for Houdini. And I think that's super awesome. There's some things that they've added in this release that are really working towards that. And we'll take a look at that here in a bit, because there are some awesome things that are coming. And one of the first things that they focus on is a new solver. It's the MPM solver. I'm not really going to go into this too much, but they have this new solver. It works for a lot of different things. It allows for some different interactions between different materials. And we kind of took a look at some of that in the live stream I did over at the sneak peek and kind of talked about it a lot in there. So I'm not going to cover that a whole lot, but I just wanted to make a note that that is something that they go over, and they kind of cover it quite a bit. So I would take a look at it. They also talk about their new wrinkle solver, which is again, it's a new solver. I think some of the cool things to note about that is it works pretty much in real time and allows for previews for the animators, and you can actually use them for the final wrinkles if you wanted to. Or they also have a new sculpting tool, which allows you to kind of sculpt and do some things. It's not a full sculpt thing that you'd see with ZBrush, but allows you to do some kind of more basic sculpting inside of Houdini, which is kind of nice to have. Another thing that they talk about quite a bit is their kind of apex system and their rigging system. So the rigs are, which I think we kind of saw this before, but rigs are easily transferable between assets, or maybe not. I feel like we saw some of this with the motion, I'm drawing a blank, but are recording your motion with cameras and stuff, and then transferring that over to different assets. The same sort of technology is basically being implemented here, where we have rigs that we're going to easily transfer between different assets. Even so we have bipads that they show, and then they transfer that rig to a bird. They also transfer it to an elephant, and it all just kind of works. And it's all based around their new tag system. So you tag the individual bones, and then it's able to recognize which bone is what and where everything goes, and apply your animations to that, which is super cool. And that even includes mechanical rigs and rigs with tons of variations. They show this little spider-like creature where they have like a whole bunch of legs, and it's automatically kind of adjusting to the terrain and walking along the terrain, which is super, super cool. And one of the things that they show with that is a new Apex scripting system. It's similar to Python. It's not going to be the exact same thing as Python, but it's similar to Python and allows you to basically do some scripting and affect rigs and animation through that script. Then they also go into the groom tools, and they have a new node called the add groom node, which allows animators to preview grooms while they're animating. And I think this is super cool. It gives you a good idea of kind of what the final groom is going to look like while you're animating, so you can get a better idea of, you know, how your animation is going to affect the actual groom itself. And that's all inside the viewport. Then they talk about animation layers, which are honestly awesome. I think this is one of the amazing things that they're bringing to Houdini, and it allows you to add procedural animation. You can add or remove kind of the different layers as you need, kind of make temporary adjustments, and then decide whether or not you want to keep those and just remove those if you don't, or add them on and kind of layer things up as you go. They also have a motion path that is now viewable in the viewport, which I think is going to be awesome for animators as well. You can edit it in the viewport and do some different things with that, which is awesome. They have ragdoll posing, which is super, super cool. I think that this is going to be awesome for animators as well. So basically, it allows you to enable ragdoll interaction between assets. So not only different assets, but interaction with itself. So they show fingers interacting with the table and then interacting with the face of the character. So all while they're posing that character, which is pretty awesome. They touch a little bit on some Solaris and Karma stuff. One thing to make a note of is adaptive sampling is now available in Karma. This is going to be super awesome. Allows you to speed up your renders. They show a scene where it speeds it up by quite a bit. So we'll be interested to see how much of a difference that actually makes. They also reworked the stage manager. So we've had the stage manager before in Solaris, but they've done some reworks to it, made some changes. They added a new lop, which is the quick surface material. We saw this in the sneak peek. And basically it just replaces the material builder to just get a quick material onto your asset. It's not necessarily for your final, materials, but if you need to just get a material onto an object, or you don't need all that customization, you can just toss on this quick surface material and you can get that in your viewport and in your renders super quickly. They also have a new node. I think this is new anyways. I'd have to double check, but I'm almost sure that they're almost positive. Words are hard. I'm almost positive that this is a completely new node. It's called the SOP modify, and it allows you to just modify your scene basically in Solaris and work with it like it's in SOPs and kind of do all sorts of different things in there. They also talk about the clone render, which we've had in Houdini 20, but they've made some changes. It now supports AOVs, which is awesome. You can also take snapshots with your clone render just directly through that interface. You can drag and drop nodes into your clone render like pane, and you can also right click and add a clone through your node view, which is awesome. They have light instances now, so they show a scene where there's like an absolute ton. I think they say like 1,500 or something like that, lights that they have instanced in your scene. And another thing that they show is a Karma lens material lop. And I think this is something that was absolutely needed. I feel like the Karma lenses were a little bit confusing to set up for a lot of people. This is just a simple lop where it's kind of set up for you. And you can do, all the different Karma lens materials with this one individual lop. All the different settings are in there. You can play around with them. You can add all sorts of different things in there just in that one lop. We also have a sculpt tool, which we talked a little bit about. They've reworked the clip SOP, which is super cool. It allows you to use basically the viewport to work with your clip, and then also it allows you to fill in the faces of the clipped geometry without having to add any extra nodes. Just allows you to do that with a simple checkbox. And another thing that I think is absolutely huge, one of the bigger things for this update for a lot of people, especially newer people, is the middle mouse button pane. So if you were to hover over a node and use your middle mouse button, you can see some different statistics and stuff about the node that you're on. They've added that as a pane, and they've completely reworked that entire like pop-up. And it allows you to have like toggles for each individual attribute or whatever that you're trying to look at. So normally you would click on them to preview them in like the viewport, like for a mask, for example. You'd click on it. Now they're all toggles, and it's just a lot cleaner of an interface. And I think that that's something that was definitely needed, especially for newer people that didn't really understand how to, see these visualizers in the viewport, and, just makes it a little bit more accessible for everyone. They talk briefly about Project Dryad, which is from the labs team that's available as an alpha. It's a suite of tools that's kind of based around biome generation. So they talk a little bit about that. You can play around with those and give them feedback so that they can better develop this tool set. So do that if you're interested. And then they move on to kind of the big thing of Houdini 20.5, in my opinion, which is Copernicus. We have talked about this extensively with the sneak peek, but now we get a much closer look at it. And I would definitely recommend going through, and if you don't watch anything else, watch this, because there is a lot that goes into this. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not going to be able to cover just because of time in this video, but there's a lot of stuff in this, and you get to see a lot of the features of Copernicus. So it's going to be a full compositing solution. They say that right off the bat, but it is also not quite there yet. It is not going to replace, your nukes or your fusions or After Effects or whatever you use for compositing. It's not going to fully replace that yet. Yet is going to be the key word. They fully plan on it being able to do that, but it's not quite there yet. Now, is it fully going to take over something like Nuke in the studio pipeline? Probably not, especially not for a long time. It's better to have a purpose-built solution for something like compositing than have it, built into something like Houdini. While it will be, available for people and will definitely replace it for some people's pipelines, it's not necessarily going to replace it for everyone's. And I think they understand that. But as it is right now, it's more for texture generation, which they take a look at pretty heavily. And we knew that from the sneak peek. So one of the things they talk about is it's OpenCL based. So it's going to be running off of your GPU, which makes it very, very fast. And they also, if you take a look in the node view, it shows that it has a resolution available. So that's interesting to see. I'll be interested to see kind of what that goes up to, what it will allow you to generate. I see in this first section, that it is, allowing you to change that, but later on, it shows that it's actually kind of grayed out. So interested to see how that all works. But the viewport for this is all based off of Vulkan. So Houdini 20.5 will by default be running in the Vulkan viewport is what it looks like. It shows that in the Solaris view, and I'm pretty sure they've come out and said that already, that it is going to be Vulkan by default, which we've had Vulkan in 20, but it was still in beta and there was a lot of issues with it. I still think that it's not fully there yet from what I've heard, but it is going to be a lot more feature complete. So it's awesome to see that as well. Another thing that is super important with Copernicus is a real-time stream, not only just to the other parts of Houdini, but it is a real-time stream to your render. So you can render directly with XPU and send your information from Copernicus, your textures from Copernicus, to your render in XPU. And you can view custom, not only just like shapes that they have to preview your materials that you're making, but you can actually, create your own, or use like the rubber toy or whatever geometry that you have as a view for your material. So if you want to make a specific material for your object, then you can see that on your object in the viewport, which is super cool. They show a bunch of SDF shapes that they use kind of to start generating these different materials and shapes for these materials that they're making. Now, I want to point out that this is not the only thing that they're going to use to generate shapes. You can pull anything from SOPs into Copernicus, and we'll talk about that here in a minute as well. But they get rasterized to pixels to work with, and this is kind of what I'm talking about. They have a node that will generate, or actually no, we'll talk about that in a minute. But the SDF shapes get rasterized to pixels, and then you work with them based off of once they're in pixels, I guess, kind of manipulate some things with that. And they show a couple of things that you do with that. You can also animate your materials. Any settings that are on any of the nodes in Copernicus, you can animate those, which is super cool. You can just animate directly to, your render. Super, super awesome. You can stream that directly to your render, which I think is going to be very interesting to see how that affects the memory footprint. They also have a tile pattern node. So they go into a bunch of different stuff with this, a lot of brick stuff, but you can also input your own tile pattern or some way of generating your own custom tiles for this node. So that's going to be interesting to see how that all works as well. But as I said, it has synergy with all of Houdini. So you can bring anything that you do in SOPs and basically any other part of Houdini, you can bring that into Copernicus and use that. And then you can also modify that data inside of Copernicus as well. You can use COPs to generate a 2D image. This is one of the things that they kind of show from 3D geometry. So you can, take a mesh and you can create a depth map from that and use that for different things. That's one of the things that they show as well. It also will be tiling by default, but they also have a hex tiling node in Copernicus as well. And one of the things that I think is super cool that they kind of say without they actually saying it, you use UVs. They say you can use UVs in Copernicus and generate, mesh specific materials. But then they also show that you can apply those materials that generate to different objects, and it still uses the UVs. So if you have, stuff set up to work with the UVs, it's going to use the new UVs if you change the mesh, which basically means that they are smart materials that you're generating inside of Copernicus. So you have the ability to do that fully inside of Copernicus, which I think is super, super awesome. So they also have mask painting, which is kind of very basic, I think, at this point, but they're going to expand on that a lot more. It's using the kind of the depth of the materials to blend the different materials together, but you can use that to kind of sort of do some substance painter-ish type things. Not exactly, but kind of. And then you also have texture animation preview in the viewport, which is pretty sweet. You kind of see how your materials are going to animate along without having to actually render that out. And then lastly, they talk about compositing and how that is not going to be fully there yet inside of Houdini 20.5. But again, it's something that they're working towards. They want it to be, something that you can just stay inside of Houdini for everything. And one of the things that I think is super cool from this is they have the ability to do live compositing while it's rendering. So it's going to be rendering, information out. You're going to apply different filters and compositing stuff, and then that's going to be reapplied onto your render in your viewport, which I think is super, super cool. And all of this is OpenFX compatible, which is a really big thing because it allows you to expand the tool set that's available in Copernicus with third-party tools. So they talk about things like Boris effects. You can use those inside of Houdini, and they work great because they're OpenFX compatible, and they're kind of built for that. Which means that I would say that you can use things like these Boris effects filters and stuff live, just like any other nodes inside of Copernicus, and they all kind of work together as well. There's no issues using the native Houdini nodes in with these other open effects that are able to be brought into Copernicus as well. So the last thing that we need to talk about in what they kind of said in the end is, when is this available? And I want to quote exactly what is said, which is, it's going to be available in a month in July. So in a month means that, to me, the way that he says that means that it's probably not going to be towards the start of the month. It's probably not going to be towards the middle of the month. It's probably going to be towards the end of the month. Now, I don't necessarily know when this was recorded, so maybe it was recorded on the 18th because we never got anything from the 18th, like they said. Maybe that's when this took place. I'm not really sure. So maybe we're looking at towards the middle of the month, but I think we're looking at the middle towards the end of July for Houdini 20.5 to be released. So you can expect that, but that is kind of an overview of some of the things that I thought were important to talk about. Definitely go and take a watch through this entire presentation. It's a long one. It's 2 hours and like 15 minutes, but it is absolutely worth it. They go over a ton of different things. At the very least, I highly recommend you take a look towards the end when they start talking about Copernicus, because there's a ton of information that is revealed in that. And I think it's very, very cool to see for yourself. So anyways, take a look through that. I'll leave a link to it in the description as well. If you want to take a look, you can just click on it there and watch the whole presentation. But anyways, I am super excited to take a look at some of these new things inside of Houdini 20.5 once it comes out. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of that. But anyways, thank you guys for watching and have a good day.